So without further ado, I will hand over to Rachel, who will lead the conversation with our panellists who know all the ins and outs of Cloverton. So thanks so much, Rachel.
Thank you, Sheena, for that. That was a great overview. And thank you to both yourself and to Councillor Hawil for all your leadership in this area over a long period of time, and also enabling the council, all of our officers to really think big on some of these issues, because we know that these are things that if we do business as usual, we won't get the outcomes that we want. So thank you for that. And just before we sort of hop into the panel, I just wanted to say, I know this is a national audience and people come from different states and won't be familiar with the Northern Corridor, but I think there's some pretty universal themes we're going to discuss. So the importance of land use and infrastructure planning, which I think has been probably discussed over the course of the couple of days, the need to look beyond boundaries and look for those communities of interest, because I think communities don't just think in terms of local government boundaries, they look in terms of regions, and I think this project really exemplifies that really well. The critical role of partnering with other levels of government, we'll talk a bit more about that. Thinking about regional infrastructure, we know that there's local infrastructure and there's state, but what about regional infrastructure? And how to really lift the bar on growth area planning. So how do we sort of contemplate incorporating landscape, sustainability features, innovative new models, co-location, infrastructure delivery? So they're the themes that I think you'll see through the course of the panel. So from my point of view, I've been really excited to lead the work in Cloverton out of Hume, working very closely with Whittlesea and with Mitchell, and of course the main developer with Stockland. So I thought I'd introduce the panel first, and then we'll get started on some questions and discussions. And I think Bronwyn comes back in for an opportunity for others to ask some questions. So I've got, you see on screen there, Rachel Thorpe, who is the Principal Community Infrastructure Planner at Hume. She's also seconded in a very similar role over at Mitchell, which is fantastic. And she's the Director of the Parks and Leisure Australia National Board and the President of the Victoria Tasmania branch of that. So hello to Rach. Thanks for, I think, joining us from a conference. Sitting next to her is Gavin Wilson, who's the Coordinator of Advocacy and Social Planning at Mitchell Shire Council. And he's worked in local government for over 25 years. He's led a range of transformational planning projects across growth areas, which have tested the role planning has in creating more resilient, sustainable, connected and healthy communities, which is, I think, pretty common with what I heard Melton and others discussing just as we came in. And then we've got Teresa Maguire, who's a Senior Development Manager at Stockland. So Teresa has 19 years experience working in the property industry in urban planning, project and development management, and her current role at Stockland sort of combines all these things, and she's certainly been the lead person from Stockland's point of view on this planning community out at Cloverton, and someone who's worked for a long time on the project from many different angles. So welcome to the panelists. It's great to have everyone here. These are very much people who've got their hands on the tools, which is great. So I might kick off with you first, Teresa. So Stockland, as we've mentioned, as the Mayor mentioned, as Sheena mentioned, really, quite fortunate having a mature developer as part of Cloverton, all the land ownership within your reach. For those who don't know Stockland, there's already been a level of planning undertaken already. So Stockland could, as we often say, walk into Hume's office and put in some applications for permit applications and just build a fairly traditional greenfield development, but they haven't done that. They've worked very closely with the councils to try and do something much bigger and much bolder. So I suppose I'm kind of curious is how does Stockland, why do they choose this area as being an area with an opportunity for a different type of greenfield development? I suppose that's one question. And the second one is why are you so committed to creating a city that's so ambitious around goals like net zero, and perhaps explain to the listeners a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel, for that intro and for those quite heavy questions, which I really would happily speak to all day and all night to anyone who would bother listening. But for this audience, I'd just like to really exemplify the importance of Cloverton to the Stockland portfolio. So Stockland is one of the nation's leading diversified property developers. We curate and create property developments across the country and have been involved in growth areas development for the last 70 years across Australia and in Victoria. So we know the space of greenfields very well, and we've been active in the Northern Growth Corridor of Victoria or of Melbourne for the last 25 years with our major flagship development in Craigieburn called Highlands, which is nearly complete development, and also now with Cloverton, which is our biggest master plan community in Victoria, and it's also the second biggest master plan community, to our knowledge, in Australia. So it's significant in its size. It's significant, as Sheena mentioned earlier, in that Stockland controls the entirety of the 1,000 hectares that Cloverton covers, and it's also the Metropolitan Activity Centre that is as nominated as per Plan Melbourne in the state's planning policy. So it inhabits the highest sort of activity centre designation in that hierarchy of activity centres in Plan Melbourne and in Victoria's planning policy. So we have very ambitious plans for Cloverton. It is a 25 to 30-year project, and we're about 7 years into the project. And while that sort of, by your maths, would be about a quarter of the way through, a lot of the initial stages of the development have been residential based. We've got 2, almost 3 primary schools built there. We have multiple open spaces. We have a shopping centre that's just recently opened. But the big part and the big game changer of Cloverton and of the Northern Growth Corridor is the MAC, which is what we're talking about today. It's the 52 hectares. That's the size of Melbourne's CBD, and that's where a lot of this, a lot of the ambition and a lot of the ambitions that were put forward and the visions put forward by the joint, the 3 councils coming together, is going to be realised in the MAC. Within the Metropolitan Activity Centre, we'll have a tertiary institution. So we'll have Melbourne Polytechnic located there. We'll also have potentially a university yet to be announced, but we're really in close discussions with the university that would like to co-locate with the TAFE entity. We're also expecting to deliver a Indigenous Centre of Excellence in the MAC as well. We have a very strong relationship with the traditional owners of Cloverton and which is the Wurundjeri people, and we have really great relationship with the Wurundjeri. Meet with them regularly to talk about how we can actually plan and design with country across the entire MAC. Stockland, as a publicly listed company, has very recently released a climate resilience plan, or an ESG strategy, which demonstrates our pathway towards net zero, scopes 1, 2 and 3 by 2050, and scopes 1 and 2 we expect to be at net zero in 2025. So that most 40% of emissions come from buildings, and being one of the nation's biggest diversified property developers, we realise our role to play in achieving net zero in this country and across the world. So it's significant, and we have a very ambitious ESG strategy in place. And Cloverton is at the heart of that. Cloverton is a flagship ESG strategy within Stockland, so a flagship ESG project within Stockland, which means that there are 3 of them across our many hundreds of projects. Cloverton is one of them, so we'll be charged with leading the way on a lot of these new initiatives that we'll be trialling to achieve net zero. It's not just decarbonisation, but that we're looking at as part of our strategy, but it's also things like social impact. It's also climate resilience, and they're key elements, and circularity, and they're key elements of the Cloverton ESG strategy. And so one of without sort of going into the detail of what we are proposing at Cloverton, it's an evolving plan, which we will be needing to partner with all of our major land users within the MAC to achieve on these ambitions. We're expecting to achieve significant reductions in net carbon. We're expecting to have a fully circular Metropolitan Activity Centre, and we're also expecting across the company to create, $1 billion worth of social value by 2030. And what social value is something that we've been working on as an organisation recently. How do you actually measure social value, and how do you actually create this? We've been working with a number of organisations to come up with a tool, a social IQ tool, which allows us to measure our impact on our social initiatives within Stockland, and that will be what we will be measuring ourselves against over the next 7 years. So we have a significant challenge put to us by the organisation, and we've been given all the tools that we need to actually achieve that. And this partnership between the 3 councils is really perfectly sets the scene for trying to achieve something very different in a greenfield area, as we're trying to do here at Cloverton.
Thanks, Teresa. That's a really great rundown on all the things you're thinking about. I think there'll be lots of questions from others around there. And I presume this builds a lot of it on the work that you've done. You've been a greenfield developer for a long time. Obviously, you mentioned Highlands, certainly in Hume, but in other parts of Victoria and indeed other parts of the country. Is this the culmination of a lot of that learning and thinking that you've done over those?
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely true. We've done a lot of initiatives across all of our projects in Victoria. I've worked with Annette Crowan from RMIT very closely on some initiatives that we talked about around early delivery of transport in greenfield areas, and the benefits that has on communities and their livability. And we've achieved many other sustainability awards, and we've done a lot of initiatives of sustainability across our portfolio. So we'll take those learnings and bring them to Cloverton, absolutely. But in a lot of instances, as is the case with sustainability and particular initiatives, they actually get old pretty quickly. And so things that we did 4 or 5 years ago are now just run of the mill. So we have to continue to throw that javelin as far out as possible to achieve things that are going to be, meeting our targets as we've set for ourselves.
Fantastic, thank you. Now it'd be good to bring in Rachel and Gavin, although their camera has gone off on my screen. Can you see us? Can you hear us? I think we may have lost them for the moment. It might just be you and I, Teresa. We've got you back on.
We had to make a quick stop. It was too noisy where we were. So.
Oh, no worries, because I know you are both at a conference. So I've just obviously had some great insights from Teresa. I just wanted to throw to you both, probably starting, or either of you can answer in relation to the regional needs assessment that was done around infrastructure. So talking about regional infrastructure, I think really important part of it. We know that local infrastructure obviously gets done and funded by developers, state infrastructure by the state government, and regional fits somewhere in between. And for this sort of catchment area, I think we're talking about the need for something a little bit different and a different approach. So I thought, Rachel, if you're happy to run through, like, what was the methodology? How did you approach it? Whatever insights you can share with people listening, it'd be great.
So firstly, the partnership started off in talking about local infrastructure, community infrastructure. From there, we actually had to define what regional infrastructure actually meant and meant for our region. So we worked quite tirelessly collectively to come up with an infrastructure list. And then we engaged Urbis to go and test that list. We had to ask them to define who our future community was going to be, confirming population forecasts, and also working out exactly what infrastructure we needed and how much could actually fit within the Cloverton map, given the finite land use that we actually had, and then try and work out throughout the process of working out how to fund collectively in a tripartisan and partnership way. We then also had to work out how we could deliver this, not in a business as usual way, because the fact is that's never been done before. So this is what I like to call falling forward. We need to work together to actually try and achieve the outcomes. And then also about how do you operate within 3 local governments, like some of this facility as well. So the needs assessment worked out exactly what we needed for people to live, work and play within the Cloverton area and the wider catchment. We then also had to work out new ways, innovative ways, not business as usual, about how we deliver all of that community infrastructure defined with that. And we also needed to ask exactly where partnership opportunities were, and then how we could locate that to get the efficiencies that we needed within the MAC. So where that's located and where we could actually leverage off the partnerships that were explored through the needs assessment with over 19 different agency, state government agencies. So as well as all the staff within the 3 different local governments. So from that, we then came up and to inform exactly what we could, where the gaps were as well within the corridor and the area, and seeing how we can actually fulfill those to ensure that they're sustainable and continue the work with the identified partners within the needs assessment.
Thanks, Rachel. And it's a huge job, isn't it? 19 different agencies. I mean, it's fair to say they're all pretty, I think, excited by being asked about this. We know that all those agencies work hard on their programs to deliver for communities, but understanding the growth in the north and the opportunity to get a foothold in it and do it in an efficient way was obviously it gave them a window into, you know, a place-based type of planning that we don't quite see here in Victoria, and perhaps not anywhere just yet, but at least it's an opportunity to start having those conversations and to progress that way of thinking.
Correct. And it's really important that this was the establishment or the first go, I suppose, at identifying partners and building up and continue to build on those relationships, and also help them also achieve some of their strategic directions of where they're needing to go as well.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly those issues of, you know, of growing communities, of sometimes development isn't as sequenced as we like, out of sequence development, where you have communities where there's a risk they could be isolated or a risk they won't get access to those services. I think everyone's learned a little bit from the past. So then the opportunity to look at that regional infrastructure is important. But I suppose just with the human element, Gavin, I'm really keen from your point of view out at the Shire of Mitchell. I know you've got different communities that, whilst Cloverton itself sits within the boundaries of Hume, it very much services the 3 municipalities, but in particular out in Mitchell. So for people mightn't be familiar, but there you've got communities there that really are going to desperately need access to the services, the infrastructure and the jobs in that area. So I suppose it'd be good to just explain to people a little bit more how that works from your Shire's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. And I should say, look, I mean, partnerships, everything, but it's testimony, the fact that Rachel and I are coming to you today from Adelaide, where we're presenting on this very project to an international symposium. And it's receiving a lot of attention and interest. And there's a lot of people saying, you know, we wish we could have had the same opportunity and not necessarily had to retrofit some of the issues that they're now dealing with. So probably about 60 or 70% of this MAC will actually have a population within Mitchell. So we're talking about 180,000 people. We know that with the national housing crisis that's in front of us at the moment, it's probably even likely to service more as we look at, you know, what the type of housing is that gets delivered in Mitchell. We know that as a sort of the last frontier of growth councils around Melbourne, we're facing significant local infrastructure pressure. We know that ICP, DCPs, they just won't get us across the line. There's only so much money out there from grants and funding. And so this new city, this MAC, is really going to help Mitchell's community have access to things that traditionally they would have waited a very, very long time to receive. So we're hoping that not only eases a little bit of pressure, but it delivers some real quality to people that should rightly expect this. So we think that's probably the, you know, really exciting aspect. The other is obviously that we can reimagine and rethink what infrastructure is. We don't necessarily always need to be delivering everything at certain points. We can rely more on regional infrastructure to carry some of that load, and we think that that's very important as well. So that's kind of where Mitchell is at. So we have Wallen, Beveridge and Lockerbie in our area as well. And it's fair to say, you know, I look at Teresa here with us today, and Stockland also have a major land holding that runs through Mitchell. So again, there's some nice synergies there in how we want to partner and see a corridor evolve beyond just the MAC, and the network of facilities going to come from that.
Absolutely. No, I think that's as you said, were critically important. And because of the catchment area, they're sort of a primary catchment, and the bigger ones, I think we talk about being the size of Canberra. I often think of it as being almost too big to fail. Like, you can't have an area like that with that many people without having all those services, infrastructure and jobs all aligned. So this is why the work we do is so important. But I suppose there's a broader question to all three of you, and jump in, is just, what are the key ingredients of a collaboration and of a partnership? So there's a regional partnership, but certainly Stockland's very much part of that. What do you think are the successful things that people need to think about when they're going into a partnership? And feel free, anyone, to jump in.
I'll go. I think leaving egos at the door is the most, being really respectful and understanding that everyone does things differently. Pivoting, and yeah, just obviously just being respectful and understanding that everyone comes from a different perspective. The three councils are very much in very different growth maturity. So understanding, and as I said before, falling forward. We can't get it right. We're forging a new path, and so just keeping everyone together and really keeping everybody an understanding of the outcomes that we want to achieve, and just bringing it back continuously to, this is the outcome that we want to achieve, and patience, I think too.
Gavin or Teresa, your thoughts?
Yeah, they're great ones, Rachel. I think having worked on both sides of the dark side of the light side, however you want to call it, but having worked in the public sector,
Which
in
is the
both
dark
local,
side and which is the light side.
exactly. Depends on who you're talking to. But I have had experience in both local and state government, and now as a developer. And I think the most important ingredient in a partnership like this is, together with all the things that you said, Rachel, but trust. Trust is really, really significant one. And also just aligning your needs. We all want to do the same thing. We all want to create great places for our constituents. We all want to create great places for our customers, and they just so happen to be the same people that we want to serve. So just to recognise that we're all here to actually do the best to serve the people that we are creating these places for, and to trust that that one another will sort of step in to help one another to get there. And we're lucky because we've had the pleasure of working with Hume over many years at Craigieburn for Highlands, and we have a great relationship that we've built over that time, the trust, and you can see in the things that we've delivered at Highlands, and the proof's in the pudding there in terms of our capability and in our desire, and also with Hume to actually let us create that great community. And the beauty of that is that coming into Mitchell Shire and coming into Whittlesea in a few more years, we can point to that, and together with Hume in this collaboration, you can sort of get confidence that we're all in this together, and we all want to achieve great things, and we want to do it in a trustworthy way and transparent way with you.
Absolutely. Gavin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's some authenticity behind this as well. And there's some willingness to be curious about things that we haven't done before. As planners, we can sometimes become quite comfortable in the known, and this project's really exposed us to what unknown feels like, but willing to charter those territories and see where it can head. The other thing that I think is really unique too is, again, from a planning perspective, we've all come from various disciplines, but we're no longer looking at ourselves as being Hume or Whittlesea or Mitchell. We are simply a team of people that are coming together, putting people at the front and centre of everything we do, and trying to get some really good planning outcomes for these future communities and our current residents. And I think that that's a really lovely holistic way of approaching it. I know, Teresa, Stockland would care just as much around its new communities and people that are going to call these places home. And, that's aspirational and what we should be doing around that and the environment. Yeah.
And Rachel, sorry, can I just add, I think it's really important as well, is the partnership has had bottom up and bottom down support at every stage of the way. So we've had all levels support for the partnership, so buy-in and the authenticity of it's a true collaboration and partnership you know, and I think that's really important that you actually in a partnership is that you've got that buy-in from all levels, committed to the outcomes. So it's really important as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's been fantastic to see the level of collaboration, you know, across offices back to Stockland, but then with the elected representatives being more recently involved and you know, the confidence they've shown in offices and the excitement they've shown for really pulling down the boundaries, if you like, and looking to the vision, you know, well into the future, well beyond, you know, probably the terms of any of them in terms of their elected positions. But that's been, yeah, fantastic and really refreshing and a great case study of when local government can work closely together and also with the development industry. So I think we've talked a fair bit about opportunity, but there's obviously some challenges. This is a big project. We're early at the stages. We've got a lot of things we want to deliver. Again, sort of open question. So what do we see as the biggest challenges to getting that integrated new city that we say that we need in order to service and deliver those fantastic outcomes for both current community, but also for the future community? So biggest challenges, what do people think?
The biggest challenge is that this has never been done before. So we can't, well, we could grab from other, you know, case studies and whatnot, but if anything, presentation yesterday highlighted that, yeah, this is very unique. So we have that challenge, but with that risk comes opportunity. So, you know, the way that we're exploring, we're really tackling the wicked problem of how do you deliver this collectively? How do you finance it? And how do you operate this into the future, especially from a, you know, from our infrastructure perspective, let alone the integrated of everything else. And I think there's been a lot of precinct work being done, but never a holistic in such a small land area that has you know, state and national significance in regards to the Mary Creek and protection of its biodiversity, and also the challenges as how do we actually build a city from scratch, and not stuff it up. Yeah, is that, you know, and trying to get it right.
I think also we have to be cognizant that this isn't happening tomorrow. I mean, I wish it was. I wish we could click our fingers and this would be our city of the future. But what we're saying here and now, it has to give us some time and traction that the commitment we make today is still the commitment that's made in the future. So there'll be other people that will come and go throughout the life of this as it gets developed. And we just have to make sure we remain true to what the original intent was, because we know things can change over the decades. Different policy, different planners can come in and out, and that can all affect things. So, you know, we've got an MOU at the moment, and that certainly gets commitment and buy-in, but we have to make sure there's longevity behind that too, and that's absolutely vital.
It's really true, Gavin, and I think somebody mentioned, you know, the benefit of doing this is that we have a blank canvas. I see that as a bit of a two-edged sword, because with the blank canvas, you don't have a train station at day one. You don't have, you know, road infrastructure at day one. So with any growth area, as we've seen in our time here at Stockland, and certainly, you know, in my life, having grown up in a growth area, when next door to me I had cows, you know, we were one of the first people to move into that new estate, and it took 15, 20 years for a train station to get there and for me to be able to catch transport to school. So that's sort of part of the problem, in that it's part of the problem, but it's also a huge opportunity for us to be able to plan it. And it doesn't all come on day one, and then you don't have that perfect sequencing of events because there are so many variables as to what comes when. We had a huge, you know, population boom, you know, 10 years ago, and a lot of those people were moving to growth areas. So what did we have to do? There was huge demand for houses. We had to build a whole lot of houses for those people to meet that demand. Turn the clock forward 5 years, and you know, we've got a problem now that's similar, but we just don't have the same amount of supply that we once had, you know, 10 years ago. And so there's a housing challenge that we're presented with, as is the case with all other growth areas across all corridors of Melbourne. Each big project and each growth area has its growing pains. You start off with a whole heap of people living there, but it takes a little while for the infrastructure to catch up. It's common, and I think we find ourselves in that situation now at Cloverton, but starting to see the green shoots of of some state government investments, some investment from Stockland, some investment from council around those key infrastructure items, and just enabling facilities that are going to make these places more livable for our people.
Very good. Conscious that there's a couple of questions coming to the chat, and I'll throw back to Bronwyn, but just a quick last one. Let's see if we can keep it nice and tight. What do we think success will look like? How do we know we've done our right job in this new city, 20, 25 years time? What does it look like? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in and say we'll have healthy, connected, resilient, sustainable communities. And I know that they're buzzwords, but let's put them into something that's really meaningful on the ground. So let's imagine in the future that we talk to people and the woes of today have gone. We think about resilience and what Nick and Annette just presented on. Now, that is great. If we can achieve that and we can have people that bounce back from whether it's disaster or anything else that might happen to them in their lives, we've created a really good outcome.
For me, I'm just going to say thriving, just a thriving community.
Teresa.
I'm going to be really specific and say that I want, we have a livability survey that we send out to all of our residents in our communities every year, and it asks questions about their livability, just all sorts of how safe they feel, how they feel about getting around, how they feel about the community, how they feel about their neighbours, how they feel about the parks, the streets. I want us to be over 80%. At Cloverton, currently we're around 50. So that's my specific goal, is I want 80%. I want people at Cloverton to feel really good about the place they live in, to the point where, that they will score us well on every single criteria that we have on those livability surveys. Very acute one for us, but it's a way that we measure how well we're doing our jobs, and that everyone sort of has a role to play in that, because we can't do our jobs without you guys. So that's what I see as success.
Yep, no, I agree with all those things. And just for me, it would be destination. This is a destination where people want to live, want to visit, want to work. Investment comes too. So that's my final bit on it. But I think I'll throw back to you now, Bronwyn, for some questions to the panel.
Yes, great. Thanks for leading that discussion. It was really interesting, full of hope and ambition and aspiration, and I love it. It's a really exciting time to be watching how Cloverton MAC progresses.